August 13th, 1926 is the birth date of Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruz. And this morning we are commemorating the 99th anniversary of the Cuban historic leader Fidel Castro, who will give us some insight and how he's impacted not just Cuba but the Caribbean and the world at large. Joining us on the set of The Now, we have political movement leader.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we seem to be having a little bit of a challenge with Ayanka's mic, but as she was saying there this morning, we are definitely getting ready for a conversation about the former leader of Cuba, historic leader Fidel Castro Ruz, and we see him here pictured, and of course 99th anniversary is what we seem to be celebrating this morning, and we're having a fantastic conversation with a graduate from Granma's University in Cuba, as well as the political leader of the movement for social justice in Trinidad and Tobago, David Abdulah, joining Ayanka to have this conversation to commemorate the 99th anniversary of Cuban historic leader Fidel Castro Ruz. Ayanka?
We're going to make sure that we have the conversation to explore a bit of the history and give some insight in this regard. Thank you very much, Raucus, for taking over there, because technology might have failed us, but history will continue to be part of our legacy. So this morning, we are joined by Nalini Sugrim, who actually would have studied in Cuba, to give us some insight, as well as political leader of the movement of social justice in TNT, Mr. David Abdulah. Good morning and welcome to The Now.
Good morning.
Morning, and morning to all of your viewers. Thanks for having me.
I know this is a little bit nostalgic for you, but this morning, in terms of the conversation, you'll be giving us some context and grounding things a little bit, because there are generations that have not in any way experienced or known of Fidel, other than maybe a poster or visual or two. So if you were to give a little bit of a description of Fidel Castro's ideas in Latin America and the Caribbean at large, how would you summarize his leadership particularly?
Well, first of all, I think he was the most consequential and transformative leader of the 20th century globally. Of course, he started the Cuban Revolution July 26, 1953, the attack on the Moncada barracks, which was not militarily successful, but was a major political intervention. And then the July 26 movement took power on the 1st of January 1959, and so Fidel was leading the Cuban Revolution from the 1st of January 59 till he became ill in 2008. So that's 40 years of the 20th century and the first 8 years of the 21st. And most transformative because his values were of humanity. I had a conversation very briefly with him once, and a longer one on another occasion. But the brief one, I was at a Solidarity conference, and he asked me, what do you think is the significance of this conference? And I said, solidarity. He said, no. I thought I made a profound statement. He said, no, it's about humanity. And I think that sums it up. Fidel was about humanity. It was about social justice, improving the lives of Cuban people through education, eliminating illiteracy, healthcare, and things like that. But it was also solidarity with the people of Southern Africa in the fight against apartheid, when Cubans went to fight in Angola and defeated the South Africans, and therefore guaranteed the independence of Angola, Mozambique, and Namibia eventually, and ending apartheid. All of those things, taking in children from Chernobyl who had been affected by the nuclear blast, and so on. So I think it was about humanity. His values of humanity and solidarity was an exemplar for us.
Fantastic. Now, because of what you've so effectively summarized, you can tell immediately how it has impacted directly the Caribbean as well. But Nalini, having actually studied there, in Cuba, that is, under his leadership as well, or during times of his leadership, would that have been part of why you chose to study there? And how did that impact your experience as well?
Well, in the beginning, I didn't really know too much about Cuba. It is in my walk in Cuba. I have spent a decade in Cuba, right? Studying 6 years, and then I got married to a Cuban. So I spent 4 extra years with him. So basically, my walk in Cuba, it opened my eyes to a lot of things, to the humanity, as Dr. Abdullah said. I met some orphans who were taken into Cuba from Ethiopia, You understand? I heard their story. They were studying with me. So I heard their story. I saw them face to face. And I know that Cuba was a part of taking in war orphans from Ethiopia and other African countries. And I read about they're helping on a long-term basis in Chernobyl, thousands of people who were affected in Chernobyl, as Dr. Abdulah said.
No, doctor, don't give me a title.
Sorry,
That's all right,
as David,
you're the doctor.
Mr. Abdulah.
Yeah.
It should be switched, but okay.
Okay.
And in that case, it definitely has made significant
It has
impact.
made a great impact on me. I saw the humanity. I saw the solidarity. I saw them mobilize young people in 2005, which I was a part of. I joined I went in to see my husband because he was taken to another province, Santi Spiritus, and I went to visit him, and I actually joined a brigade to change incandescent bulbs into fluorescent bulbs, and they were using the youth and mobilizing them house to house, and I was actually a part of that. So I saw the mobilization, I saw volunteerism, I saw the community coming together to make their country better with little resources, but with a lot of human power, and it moved me very much.
Now,
Yeah.
how moved you, I imagine, impacts what you decided to do with yourself and how you contribute to society.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Abdulah, do you think that we see that in our day-to-day Caribbean person thinking, I want to say?
That sense of solidarity used to exist to a much greater extent in generations gone by. But the globalized world now of what we call neoliberalism, there's a new value system. Tony Watkins, the HR expert in Trinidad, first coined the phrase that I heard. It's now A for apple, B for bat, and C for yourself. Yeah, and that's very unfortunate. And Cuba therefore stands as a different example. And Fidel demonstrated that. You never ever heard anybody say that Fidel was corrupt or lived a lifestyle that was different. And if you visit his grave, it's just a single stone with the word Fidel. That's all. There are no monuments to Fidel in Cuba. He never wanted that kind of physical representation of what he lived his life for and stood for. And I think that signifies a lot about Fidel Castro, the man and the revolutionary.
Absolutely. But because we want to be very specific, we are in Trinidad and Tobago, are there specific aspects of that ideology that we could stand to benefit from?
Certainly. The issue of social justice, fighting for equality, betterment for everybody to have a better life, and not just a wealthy few. That essentially is what it is. And I remember we had a party conference some years ago at UE, and we had the benefit of Commandante Balaguer coming to be part of that. And he looked at the banner and he said, you know what, in 1950s, 1959, when we took government, what we were fighting for was really social justice, because it was giving everybody the opportunity to fulfill their total potential. And they demonstrated that. Keyshawn Walcott, gold medalist, Olympics, was trained by a Cuban coach. Yes? And we could give so many more examples. The medical brigades that have operated throughout the Caribbean and elsewhere in the world. That's all an example of Cuba giving back, even though, as Nalini said, they are under so much pressure because of the blockade, which is illegal, illegitimate, it's criminal. The UN has voted against it. Only the United States and Israel supports the blockade. But the Cuba has to be punished for daring to stand up to the power of the United States. And Fidel said, we're not going to sell out our values or principles to be able to get rid of the blockade. We're going to stand firm and defend what we believe in.
Now, in terms of the actual ways that we can continue to celebrate and honor these sorts of distinctions that he's added to the Caribbean space, what were some of the things we could perhaps do on a more individualistic basis? And we'll start there with you, Nalini, and perhaps on a more countrywide basis, Mr. Abdulah, how we can celebrate a great man.
Individualistic meaning as an individual, right? Well, we could help our fellow man, basically anybody who needs a helping hand, we can extend that within our power and resources. So basically what you can do is you can do things like educating. You can give lessons, free lessons in your time if you have, We have a lot of Hispanics in the country right now, so like where I understand both languages, what I could probably do is give them a helping hand so that they could actually get a job and not have to resort to prostitution or to drugs or anything like that, criminal activity basically. We could help the youth, you understand? We could basically with what we have been exposed to and we have benefited from the Cuban government because of Fidel's leadership, we could extend a helping hand to others in society who are in need.
Mr. Abdulah?
But you know, Fidel had great respect for CARICOM because in 1973, 4 newly independent Caribbean countries, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Barbados, established diplomatic relations with Cuba. We were the only 4 in this hemisphere, apart from Mexico, to do that and broke the diplomatic isolation of Cuba. And Fidel said, these small countries didn't have to do that. They're living within the U.S. Sphere of influence, but they did this thing. And so he started a process where every 2 years there's a summit between Cuba and CARICOM. And so strengthening the relations with Cuba at that level is very, very important. And speaking out against the blockade. And I think at another level, we could provide support for the Cuban people who are in great difficulty now because of the nature of the U.S. blockade that has been strengthened by Cuba being put on a so-called list of countries that sponsor terrorism, which of course is false. Cuba simply facilitated peace talks between the government of Colombia and the Colombian armed groups. And for that, the Cubans are being punished, and we should support them.
Of course, we generally could have much more conversation on a man who has impacted the region for decades and decades to come, but we do have to wrap things up here for now. So as we do commemorate the 99th anniversary of Cuban historic leader Fidel Castro, I want to say thank you very much for sharing your knowledge, your time, and your impacts with us here on The Now. We will continue this and more conversations to inspire you, though, after these messages. Stick around. The Now continues after this break.